Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest forms of written records that we have.
There are ancient stories that even today science still cannot fully explain. And one of the most mysterious among these is about a place that is said to be right beneath the earth itself. This didn't come from modern conspiracy theories. It also didn't start on the internet. It came from an ancient clay tablet that has existed for more than 4,000 years. And according to some researchers, it's possible that this refers to a hidden location, an entrance leading to the world beneath the ground. In a museum vault in Istanbul, there's an old tablet stored that most people hardly notice. At first glance, it just looks like an ordinary piece of clay with engraved symbols. But behind those ancient writings, there's a hidden detail that has been debated for decades by archaeologists, geologists, and even conspiracy researchers. According to them, it doesn't just depict an underground world. Instead, it also seems to give directions on where it can be found. And what's even more surprising is that when we look at the ancient migration routes in Asia, it actually makes sense why the tablet pointed to that location. In this video, we will try to break down what is really written on this ancient tablet and why, even until now, there are still people who believe that there is a real entrance to what they call the inner world. But before we start, don't forget to like this video. It means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much, and now let's get started. The tablet we're talking about here is known by the catalog name K3657. This is an artifact that is part of the British Museum's collection, and there is also an almost identical copy of it on display at the Istanbul Archaeology Museums. It was found in the ancient city of Nippur, which is now part of modern-day Iraq. According to historians, this tablet was possibly made around 2400 BCE. But what's even more mysterious is its content. The Sumerians did not use the term inner earth like we do today. Instead, they called it Kur, and it's important to understand that, because according to old records, it wasn't just a simple underworld. It also wasn't hell in the modern religious sense. For the Sumerians, Kur was a real place beneath the surface of the earth, a place that was said to be connected to the Anunnaki, and these were the beings they considered like gods. According to their story, that's where they first came from before ascending to the heavens. And this is where things get even stranger, because the tablet describes Kur as a place filled with vast waters, endless darkness, and shining stones that give off light. But the most intriguing part is that the text says the sky there isn't overhead. Instead, it's curved downward. For a very long time, most scholars thought this was just a poetic description of the afterlife or spiritual realm. But some people's perspective changed when a controversial theory came out in 1792. According to Edmund Halligan, it's possible that the inside of the Earth isn't solid. In his hollow Earth theory, he suggested that there might be overlapping layers or spheres inside the planet. And by 1818, John Cleves Symmes Jr. made it even more popular. According to him, there were supposedly openings at the North Pole and South Pole that could serve as entrances into the earth. And because of this, the old stories about underground worlds suddenly became even more mysterious. But the Sumerian tablet doesn't just contain simple descriptions. According to some researchers, it also seems to include directions. The text supposedly mentions the mountain where the sun is swallowed, the river that flows back toward the stone, and a 7-day journey from the land where bronze is born. At first glance, those lines just seem poetic. But according to historians, ancient evidence is often very detailed and literal, especially when it comes to trade routes, military expeditions, or sacred journeys. That's why there are researchers who believe that the tablet might be referring to a real location. For many years, they tried to figure out what the mountain where the sun is swallowed meant. And for a long time, no one could answer, until a new interpretation emerged in 1967. According to Samuel Noah Kramer of the University of Pennsylvania, The previous translation of a Sumerian word might have been wrong. The word that was previously translated as swallowed could also mean entered or passed through. This means that the line is not really about the sunset. It could possibly be describing a mountain with a large opening that sunlight can enter all the way to its deepest part. And that's where some researchers became even more interested. Because in different parts of Asia, there are real cave systems that are so vast and deep, the kind where you could get lost inside for several days. The second clue is the river that flows back toward the rock. And at first glance, that seems impossible because rivers naturally flow downstream. But according to geologists, there's a real phenomenon called a tidal bore. This happens when the tide from the sea is so strong that it forces the river water to flow backward, upstream. And surprisingly, some ancient civilizations were already familiar with this phenomenon even back then. So for some, it's possible that what the tablet describes is not just fantasy. It's possible that this was a real place, which gradually became a legend as time passed. Despite this, there's one detail in that line that's even more unusual. It's not just a river that flows backward. What it actually says is that it flows toward the rock. For some researchers, that's a different clue. Because when water seems to flow into a rock, it's possible that this isn't just an ordinary river. It could be a river that flows into a large cave system. And if you're looking for a river with a strange current that suddenly disappears into vast caves, then the place you're searching for isn't just any ordinary place. You need a very specific geological formation, a place where water, rocks, mountains, and underground passages are all connected. But the third clue, this might be the clearest of all. According to the tablet, the place is said to be a 7 days journey from the land where bronze is born. At first glance, it seems symbolic. But if you think about it, bronze is not a natural metal that you can just find in the ground. It's an alloy or a mixture of copper and tin. And during the Bronze Age in Mesopotamia, tin was a big problem. There's a lot of copper in different places, but tin is much harder to find. So to make bronze, ancient people had to look for tin from faraway regions. And where were the nearest large sources back then? In the mountains of Central Asia, places that we now know as Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and Western China. So if you follow the clue of a 7 days journey from the ancient places where bronze was made in ancient Bactria, it will lead you to a very specific zone on the map. And this is where more modern science comes in, because suddenly DNA research became part of this story. In 2019, there was a study published in Nature where scientists examined the genetic markers of people from Central Asia to East Asia. According to Dr. Chuanchao Wang and his research team, they noticed something unusual. In the communities living near the Tian Shan mountain range, a genetic bottleneck occurred around 2400 BCE. A genetic bottleneck happens when a population suddenly decreases or a large part of the group disappears from an area. But here's what's unusual. It doesn't seem to have been caused by a severe disease, famine, or the sudden death of many people. The genetic diversity didn't just disappear, it's as if it moved. It's as if a part of the population left and went somewhere else. And after a few generations, some returned with the same genetic markers. But the mitochondrial DNA patterns are different now. And why is Tian Shan important? Because the Tian Shan range, which stretches into modern-day Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Western China, is known for having some of the largest cave systems in Asia. In just one region, there are over 4,000 caves. And some of these extend for several kilometers underground. This is where things get more interesting, because there are some cave systems in this region that have almost the same features as those described in the Sumerian Tablet. There are large underground rivers. There are chambers with a natural glow from minerals that seem to provide light in the midst of complete darkness. And there are ceiling formations that curve downward. If you were an ancient person seeing this for the first time, you might think that what's above you is like an upside-down sky. But of course, there's a big question here. If the Sumerians lived in Mesopotamia, how would they know about the cave systems in Central Asia? That's not just next door. It's not a place you can just go to in a day. And this is where what archaeologists call the prehistoric ancestor of the Silk Road comes in. Before the Silk Road became famous for connecting the East and West, there were even earlier trade routes that ancient people were already using. One of these is the Tin Road, which is also sometimes called the Bronze Road. This was the route that connected the Mesopotamian civilizations to the metal sources of Central Asia as early as 3000 BCE. Clay tablets have been found in the ancient city of Ur that describe merchant expeditions lasting many months. These journeys passed through lands of many mountains to obtain tin. This was not a simple exchange of goods. This was not like an ordinary market trip. These were long journeys that were carefully written down and recorded. This included landmarks, rest stops, dangers along the way, and important features of the area. So if you look at it in this context, the tablet about the core can be read in another way. It's not just a myth, it's not just a story about the afterlife. It could be an account of a traveler, an ancient report about a strange geological discovery found while traveling for the tin trade. And if we try to find the location, there's one place that keeps appearing on the map. When you combine the three clues from the tablet, the mountain that seems to be entered by the sun, the river that flows toward the rock, and the 7 days' journey from the land of bronze, a convergence point appears, the Fergana Valley, a vast and important valley that is now part of Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. In ancient times, this region was one of the important centers of bronze production, and because it is located between trade routes, mountains, rivers, and cave systems, it's not hard to imagine why some researchers have pointed to this place as a possibility. For them, maybe the core mentioned in the tablet is not just a figment of imagination. Maybe it's a memory of a real place which, as thousands of years passed, slowly turned into legend. Nevertheless, this is where the story becomes even more terrifying, because there is a place in Central Asia that almost matches every detail found in the Sumerian tablet, and its name is the Kanigut cave system. In the local folklore of Tajikistan, it is also called Gateway Cave, and when you look at its description, it seems to match exactly with the clues from the ancient tablet, the entrance described in the story. It happened month after month. And because of the angle and direction of the mountain, there are times of the year, especially during the summer solstice, when sunlight directly enters the cave network. For some researchers, this is possibly what the mountain where the sun enters means, but it doesn't end there. Inside the cave system, there's an underground river that flows beneath the ground. And according to some geological studies, because of the influence of a massive subterranean force, the direction of the river's flow changes twice a day. This means that there are times when it seems to flow backward, exactly like what's written on the tablet. And as you go deeper into the cave, it becomes even stranger. The cave walls contain a mixture of selenite crystals and fluorite deposits. When a bit of light hits it, or sometimes even in complete darkness, it gives off a natural glow. Some early explorers described it as looking like a sky full of stars beneath the earth. And this is where Soviet researchers started to become interested in the 1960s. They sent geological survey teams to investigate some parts of the Kanigut system. And according to reports, the cave network was extremely vast. The sections they were able to map reached no less than 14 kilometers. But according to sonar readings, it could be even deeper and wider. There are also temperature readings that show geothermal activity in the deeper parts of the mountain. And when they conducted acoustic tests, they discovered some very large hollow chambers. Some of them could be over 300 meters high, like underground cathedrals hidden inside the mountain. But the most surprising thing is, it wasn't the geological formations that alarmed the Soviet teams the most. It was evidence of ancient humans. There were pottery fragments that, according to analysis, could possibly date back to the Bronze Age. There were broken tools. And most importantly, there were symbols carved on the cave walls. And according to reports, these were not local markings. It's also not just something that resembles Sumerian writing. According to some researchers, what they actually saw was real Sumerian cuneiform. Imagine that. Symbols from Mesopotamia that were found thousands of kilometers away, carved on cave walls more than 1,500 meters underground. Because of this, the whole discovery was suddenly classified. In 1967, the Soviet government closed off some parts of the cave. The official reason was geological instability. But by the 1990s, some declassified documents started to surface. And according to those, the real reason was different. As the excavation teams went deeper, they found what seemed to be artificial structures inside the cave chambers. There were walls made of carefully cut stone blocks. There were channels that seemed to be made to control the flow of water. And there was one thing that kept being mentioned in the reports: a large circular platform whose purpose they couldn't explain. They said it was surrounded by various Sumerian inscriptions. One of the Soviet geologists who worked there, Dr. Viktor Yefimenko, gave an interview in 1998 before he died. According to him, in the deepest chamber they reached, they saw a stone archway, and it was clear that it wasn't a natural formation. It looked man-made. He said that a repeating symbol was carved on it. And according to the translation, that symbol matches the Sumerian cuneiform for the word Kur. But what's more disturbing is that beyond the archway, the sonar equipment detected something they couldn't explain. It wasn't an ordinary cave chamber. They said it was a massive void, so huge that the sonar couldn't determine its boundaries. When they sent out seismic pulses, the echo showed that the empty space extended for several kilometers in every direction. And this is where the biggest debate begins. Is it just a vast, unexplored cave system? Or is it possible that this is the origin of legends about an inner world beneath the earth? Until now, there is still no clear answer. But according to some researchers, there's another detail that makes everything even more complicated, and that is the DNA evidence. In the same 2019 genetic study that found unusual population bottlenecks in the Tian Shan region, scientists discovered something else. According to their findings, some modern populations living near the Fergana Valley have genetic markers that do not match those of the surrounding populations. And even more surprising, those markers are said to be closer to ancient Mesopotamian DNA samples taken from Sumerian burial sites. So the question suddenly arose: how did Sumerian genetic markers end up in the isolated mountain communities of Central Asia? The usual explanation from historians is simple: migration, trade routes, and intermarriage between different groups of people while traveling. But according to some researchers, there's something unusual about the distribution pattern, because those genetic markers aren't just scattered along the entire trade routes. It's like they're concentrated in areas that are close to the cave systems themselves. Despite this, when the researchers looked at exactly where those unusual genetic markers appear, they found that they aren't simply scattered along the trade routes. Instead, most of them are centered in certain particular villages right near the Kanigut cave system. And what's even more surprising is that those villages have long-standing oral traditions about people who came from under the mountain. According to the old stories of the locals, it was more than 4,000 years ago when people came out of the cave and mingled with the families in the area. At first glance, this seems like ordinary folklore, but there is one village that especially caught the interest of researchers. Its name now is Kaisiljar, and up to now, they still practice a tradition every summer solstice. Every generation, there are some families who go to the entrance of the cave to perform a ceremony. They bring bread, salt, and sometimes even bronze artifacts as offerings. Afterwards, they climb up to the upper chambers of the cave while repeating old words that they themselves no longer understand. It's like a memorized tradition that's just passed down from the elders. But in 2015, a linguistic anthropologist recorded those words. And when these were analyzed, the researchers were surprised because according to the analysis, those were archaic Sumerian prayers. They were prayers asking for safe passage and blessings from the dwellers of Kur. And this is where the mystery deepens. Because why would anyone want to enter? According to the tablet, Kur is not just an ordinary place. It is said to be a source of knowledge. There's a part of the text that says the Anunnaki taught to humans the secrets of the earth's blood. And according to some scholars, this could possibly refer to metallurgy and mining, techniques in making bronze, smelting methods, and knowledge about mixing metals. Because it's a big mystery for historians why advanced bronze technology suddenly appeared in Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE, as if there weren't any clear developmental stages before it. And there's another strange detail on the tablet. It mentions stones that hold fire without burning. For many centuries, most people thought that was just poetic language. But when archaeologists understood the environment of the region better, the interpretation changed. It's possible that what's being described here is petroleum, crude oil. And what's surprising is that the Fergana Valley region sits on top of one of the richest oil deposits in Central Asia. In ancient times, it's possible that people there saw natural oil seeps, the kind where oil would just naturally rise up from cracks in the rocks. And in some cave systems, there might even be pressurized petroleum gushing out from the limestone fields. If Sumerian traders saw this back then, you can understand why the place became special to them. Because think about it, you see a black liquid that you can set on fire, and it gives off flame, light, and heat coming straight from beneath the earth. For ancient people, it's easy to think that this is fire from the world beneath the ground, a gift from the gods of the core. But there's another part of the tablet that researchers also overlooked for a long time. According to the text, before entering the core, one must first go through the purification of the blood. For a long time, many thought this was just a spiritual metaphor, like a ritual cleansing before entering a sacred place. But in 2021, there was a study about high-altitude cave systems that provided a new possible explanation. According to modern medical science, the atmosphere inside deep caves is very different compared to the air on the surface of the Earth. Carbon dioxide levels are higher, the oxygen ratios are different, and sometimes there is also a high concentration of radon gas. In addition, the Fergana Valley is between 1,000 and 3,000 meters above sea level. And according to genetic studies, populations that have lived in high-altitude areas for a long time develop special adaptations for oxygen processing. One of these is the EGLN1 gene variant. But the ancient Mesopotamians, who lived at almost 60 meters above sea level, probably didn't have these adaptations. So just imagine what would happen. You would travel from lowlands to high mountains, then go down into deep cave systems with a different atmosphere. This could possibly cause severe altitude sickness, hypoxia, and extreme stress on the body. So according to some researchers, the purification of the blood might not be a metaphor. This could be an ancient way of saying that only a few people are able to safely enter the deepest part of the cave. People whose bodies are adapted to the environment. And this is possibly connected to the genetic markers found in some modern populations in the Fergana Valley, because those include the EGLN1 variant. And what's even more unusual is that its concentration is higher in that region compared to the surrounding areas, as if there's a strong selective pressure in the area, making it seem like the body needs that specific adaptation to survive for a long time in that environment. But now we need to talk about the most controversial part of all, the hollow earth theory. Is it really true that there's a civilization inside the earth as described by the Sumerian tablets? According to modern science, it's almost certainly not true. Seismology has long proven that the earth is made up of crusts, mantle, and core. We have no evidence of massive hollow spaces that could be inhabited by an entire civilization. But that doesn't mean that all ancient accounts are just made up. What likely happened was this. Ancient people witnessed real geological phenomena. Vast cave systems, underground rivers, natural glowing minerals, strange oil seeps. And because their scientific understanding was still limited back then, they gave these things cultural and spiritual interpretations. And over thousands of years, the real place became a legend. And in fact, it's possible that the story written by the Sumerians wasn't really wrong. The only problem is they used the language and understanding that they had during their time. When they discovered the extremely deep cave systems, underground rivers, and minerals that sparkled in the dark, they didn't have modern science to explain them. So they described these things using the concepts they knew: gods, sacred places, and cosmic meanings. And if you think about it, it actually makes sense. Because imagine an ancient person seeing a cave chamber that's almost 300 meters high for the first time. Above, there are glowing minerals embedded in the ceiling. And while you're standing in the middle of a massive underground dome, the entire ceiling looks like a curved sky coming down around you. That's exactly what the tablet described: a sky that curves downward. The great waters can easily be connected to the underground lakes and rivers. And the eternal darkness, broken by luminous stones, is almost a perfect description of the bioluminescent minerals inside the caves. That's why, according to some researchers, what the Sumerians saw was real. But it's not an entrance to a secret civilization inside the earth. It's a natural wonder. It was so unusual for their time. That's why they gave it spiritual and mythical meaning. But even so, there's still a part of the story that can't be fully explained: the Soviet discoveries in 1967. Because if everything was just natural formations, why did the findings need to be classified? Why were the caves closed? The official explanation is geological instability. But according to some seismographic readings from the region, there's not enough evidence of severe instability to justify permanent sealing. That's why another theory emerged. In 2003, Russian archaeologist Larisa Kulikova gave her own interpretation. According to her, maybe what the Soviet teams discovered were not inner Earth dwellers. Instead, it's possible that what they found were ancient mining operations, real Bronze Age miners who were searching for copper deposits inside the cave systems. And over time, they built infrastructure to extract these resources. If that's the case, the circular platform mentioned in the reports could be a smelting area. The water channels might be part of the ore washing system. And the Sumerian inscriptions could possibly be ownership markers or religious dedications connected to mining. And honestly, that theory makes a lot of sense, because ancient miners were known to work even in very dangerous places if the mineral deposits were valuable. And it's well documented that there was a Sumerian presence in Central Asia because of the tin trade. So if it can be proven that they were not just traders, but also active miners, that would be a major historical discovery. It may not be world-shattering, but it's still extremely important. And according to some researchers, that might be the real reason why the discoveries became classified. Because during the Soviet era, discussions about resources, industrial development, and historical ownership of the region were extremely sensitive. But even with this explanation, there's still one detail that keeps coming up in the discussion: the massive void that the sonar equipment supposedly detected. According to Dr. Viktor Yefimenko, the chamber is so large that the sonar couldn't map out its entire boundaries. And according to cave experts, that's not normal. Yes, there are some extremely large cave chambers in the world, like Hang Son Doong in Vietnam and some massive cave systems in China. But no matter how big those are, they can still be mapped using standard equipment. So if it's really true that the void can't be mapped, there are only two possibilities. Either there's a problem with the equipment, or there's a truly anomalous formation under the mountain. In 2018, there was an independent research team that tried to enter the Kanigut system again. This included geologists, archaeologists, and documentary filmmakers. Because more than 50 years have passed, some of the Soviet-era seals are slowly deteriorating. And since the old Soviet security restrictions are no longer in place, they were allowed limited access. But they only reached up to 2.4 kilometers because there was a collapse zone blocking the way. And according to the team, it didn't look like a natural rockfall. It seemed like a deliberate blockage. There were rocks carefully placed to block the path. When they used ground-penetrating radar, it showed that the collapse zone was only about 6 meters thick, and behind it, the cave system continued. But because they didn't have excavation equipment and lacked permits, they couldn't continue. Even so, they confirmed some important details. There was Bronze Age pottery. There were tool fragments. And yes, there were Sumerian cuneiform inscriptions on the cave walls, more than 800 meters from the entrance. And what's even more surprising, some of those inscriptions had the same phrases as the tablet found in Nippur. They had the same descriptions of the journey to the core, but there was additional information. There were warnings, instructions on which passages to follow and which to avoid. There were also references to the breath that steals life. And according to modern cavers, the meaning was clear. That was a warning about carbon dioxide pockets and oxygen-depleted zones that are common in deep caves. And this is where the researchers came up with a new interpretation. According to them, what we're looking at isn't mythology, it's an ancient safety manual. The Sumerians who went to that place wrote practical survival information, but they mixed it with the religious beliefs of their time. So the tablet doesn't mean here is the magical entrance to the underworld. Instead, it's more like saying, here is a very dangerous place that requires proper knowledge and preparation before entering. And this is also supported by genetic evidence, because the Mesopotamian DNA markers in local populations show that there was contact more than once. This happened repeatedly over many generations, and that's exactly what you would expect if there were long-term mining operations in the region. There were Sumerian overseers, there were technical specialists, there were traders, there was intermarriage with the locals, there was transfer of knowledge, and as time passed, their practical traditions gradually became spiritual rituals. So it's possible that the modern ceremonies at the cave entrance are just distorted versions of the real Bronze Age safety protocols. The bread, salt, and bronze offerings might not have been mystical rituals back then. They might have just been symbols of the things needed for the mining operations to survive. Bread for food, salt for preservation, and bronze as a symbol of metalworking skills. Even ancient prayers may have originally been work songs, safety checklists, or coordination phrases for mining teams that became sacred recitations over thousands of years. And honestly, this doesn't diminish the significance of the discovery. In fact, it makes some researchers even more impressed. Because think about it, using only Bronze Age technology, ancient people were able to explore and document one of the most complex cave systems in Central Asia. They were able to create trade routes that spanned thousands of kilometers. They were able to transfer advanced metallurgy knowledge to different cultures, and they created records that are detailed enough for us to reconstruct today, more than 4,000 years later, where they went and what they saw. But until now, no one still knows what is really behind the deliberate collapse zone in the Kanigut system. We don't know if the Soviet sonar readings are really accurate. We don't know what those architectural structures they saw really are. And it's also not clear what the true purpose of the circular platform is. Is it really a Bronze Age structure? Was it just a wrong interpretation? Or is there another explanation? For now, the governments of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan still don't prioritize large-scale exploration of the area. The region is too remote. The politics are complicated. And the logistics for a full excavation are extremely expensive. In 2018, the research team applied for excavation permits to remove the collapse zone, but until now, the approval is still under bureaucratic review. So this is our situation right now. The tablet K3657 seems to refer to the actual location. Its clues point to the Fergana Valley and the Kanigut cave system. There is archaeological evidence of Sumerian presence in the region. There is genetic evidence of long-term contact between Mesopotamian and Central Asian populations. And there are Soviet discoveries that were enough to classify and close the caves. Is it true that there is an inner Earth civilization? Almost certainly not, modern science does not support the hollow earth theory. But is there a vast unexplored cave system with Bronze Age archaeological sites and possibly rich mineral deposits? Almost certainly yes. And is it possible that the directions on the Sumerian tablet are accurate given the number of clues? It also seems the answer is yes. And perhaps that's the most impressive thing of all. Not because there's a secret world beneath the earth, but because there was an ancient civilization that was able to document a very complicated place using only the limited knowledge and tools of their time. They left behind a map, and after 4,000 years, that map still works.